Branded a criminal and thrown into the military camp as a comfort woman, I reached out to the young general who had been my childhood sweetheart, begging for help, only for him to slap my hand away. He walked past me and pulled another woman into his arms, letting the soldiers drag me away. Later, he knelt before me, weeping and begging for forgiveness. I embraced him and drove a knife into his chest. A slap in exchange for a life. Worth it. My name is Song Chunyan, and my life took a sharp turn after my 15th birthday. Before that, I was the envy of everyone. Daughter of the Grand Commandant, my father wielded immense power, and I was favored by the imperial family. Since childhood, I had access to the palace. The empress had only one son, who had been sent away as a political hostage to the northern tribes, and with no children by her side, she treated me like her own daughter. But I never let the favor go to my head. I conducted myself with grace and humility, praised as the model young woman of the capital. On the day of my 15th birthday banquet, the imperial guards suddenly surrounded the Grand Commandant's estate. They uncovered letters proving my father had colluded with the enemy, along with foreign tokens. The emperor was furious and issued multiple decrees, urging the Ministry of Justice to investigate without delay. In just 5 days, the high-profile case of the Grand Commandant's treason concluded swiftly. The evidence was irrefutable. The charges were confirmed. All the men in the Song household were taken to the public market and beheaded. The women were sent to the frontier as comfort women for the soldiers. Outside the prison, the sunlight was harsh and blinding. I squinted against it, catching the faint scent of blood lingering in the air. With the sun that high, my father, older brother, and younger brother must have been executed by now. My mother had collapsed at my feet, lifeless. She'd swallowed poison that morning. She had been dead for hours. I didn't know if she had reunited with my father and the others in the afterlife. I gently turned her pale, blood-streaked face toward the wall, so the guards outside wouldn't realize right away that she was dead. That way, I could stay by her side a little longer. The dank prison suddenly filled with the faint scent of perfume. The empress, whom I once regarded like a mother, stood outside the cell, her face full of pity. "Chunyan, come. I'll take you out of here." The jailer opened the door and shoved in a girl wearing a prison uniform. She was about my age and looked a lot like me. She was going to swap her out for me. Treason is a crime of the highest order. For the women in my family, not to be executed was already considered a rare mercy from the emperor. For the empress to try and take me away, at a time like this, was an act even she wouldn't dare attempt unless the emperor himself had allowed it. Unless he knew. Our family's secret chamber was hidden inside the rockery on the lake. The empress had, on several occasions, subtly pried into the Grand Commandant's secrets. Once, in my naivete, I had joked about how my father had fallen into the water late one night after going to the rockery. When the commander of the Imperial Guards arrived, he went straight for the lake. That was when I realized my careless words had doomed my entire family. I held my mother in my arms and didn't move. "Yenner, hurry," the empress said. "I'll hide you in the palace. No one will ever find you." The girl was already sitting beside me, trembling all over. "I thank your majesty for your kindness," I said, "but I am the daughter of a traitor. How can I live beside the Son of Heaven?" I wiped the blood from the corner of my mother's mouth. She had always cared about her appearance. Even in death, she deserved to look dignified. The empress sighed and said, "I know you're full of resentment, but this is your only chance to survive. The frontier is far and harsh. You won't survive out there. I believe your parents would want you to live." Hearing her mention my parents, I looked up and replied with sarcasm, "Your Majesty has such a merciful heart, but imperial orders must be followed. You'd best return. This place is filthy. You wouldn't want to tarnish your royal grace." Seeing I wouldn't yield, she flicked her sleeves in anger and stormed off. Before leaving, she said, "Song Chunyan, do you even know what kind of opportunity you're refusing? Remember this, I am not like the emperor. I wanted to save your family. Originally, sparing your life was my birthday gift to you. Soon after, the jailers came in to take my mother's body. I clung to her hand, refusing to let go until they pried her fingers from mine. Half a poison pill dug from her hand. This was the only birthday gift I received when I turned 15. There were many women in the Taiwei manor, 3 concubines, several mistresses, and all the maids and servants who had signed indenture contracts. 2 long lines stretched at the city gates. The commoners hurled dirty water at us. With the country in turmoil and the people suffering, a high-ranking official accused of colluding with the enemy was naturally seen as the root of all their misery. My maid Xiaolan fought her way through the crowd to reach me and tied herself to my side. Her small body stood protectively in front of me. Even now, she was still trying to shield me. "Miss, I know the master was framed. We need to stay alive, so we can find the evidence and clear his name." She voiced exactly what was in my heart. Though father held great power, he had always acted with caution and never took sides. A man like that wouldn't risk everything for a bit of money. That was also why I didn't choose to follow my mother in death. I had to uncover the truth and atone for my own mistake. Barely half a day into our long journey of exile, my feet were already covered in blisters, but I wasn't allowed to stop. The rope around my wrists had cut into my skin, and the sweat stung the raw wounds, making the pain unbearable. But worse than the physical pain was the harassment from the soldiers escorting us. Everyone knew what awaited women sent to military camps. The soldiers acted without restraint, often dragging a woman into the woods to assault her. Hearing the awful noises, Xiaolan and I clung to each other, trembling in fear, terrified we might be next. And as fate would have it, that moment came sooner than expected. Because I was limping, a soldier whipped me for falling behind. The torn fabric of my clothes revealed the bare skin of my back. A vulgar-looking man put away his whip and walked over to untie my ropes, trying to drag me away. I screamed and struggled. Xiaolan clung to my legs to stop him from taking me. The commotion caused the whole procession to break formation. "Stupid bitch, still think you're some noble lady? Playing the virtuous card now. She's General Cheng's fiancé." Xiaolan shouted desperately, and sure enough, the man froze. "General Cheng? Cheng Qi? You're Song Chunyan." He had heard of me. I was the fiancé of Cheng Qi, the war god of the borderlands. We had grown up together since childhood. Half a year ago, when Cheng Qi set off on his expedition, he stood before the entire capital and shouted to the crowd, "Song Chunyan, wait for me to return victorious and marry you." He promised to marry me with his victory as the bride price, and the whole city witnessed it. At that thought, the jailer didn't dare touch me again. Although I was a criminal now, we were headed to Cheng Qi's military camp. If something happened to me on the way and Cheng Qi found out, the consequences would be unbearable. I held on to Xiaolan, grateful for our narrow escape. But the man suddenly grabbed Xiaolan instead. "I can't touch her, but you're just a maid. Why should I be scared?" Xiaolan had been with me since I picked her up as a child. We'd grown up together. I sobbed as I held on to her, cursing and threatening the guard, but in the end, Xiaolan was dragged away. This had happened so many times that the surrounding women were already numb. Some even laughed when they saw what happened to us. Xiaolan's pained screams echoed through the night. I cried out helplessly, "Help us. Somebody help us. Help us. Someone please help us." My voice went hoarse, but it was no use. When Xiaolan returned, her clothes were soaked in blood. She wiped away my tears and whispered, "Miss, it's okay. I'm fine. Don't cry." I forced myself not to cry, clenched my teeth to keep them from chattering, and crouched down to straighten her disheveled clothes. Animals worse than animals. My eyes burned with rage as I silently memorized the faces of those soldiers. That night, it started to drizzle. We found a small ruined temple to shelter from the rain, but it was too small to hold everyone, so the soldiers dragged a few women inside while the rest were left to stand in the rain. Xiaolan developed a high fever. Her wounds had not been treated, and things would only get worse. The soldiers had medicine, but they weren't going to waste it on a dying maid. I could only hold her tightly, trying to shield her from the wind and rain with my body. But it wasn't enough. Her dry, cracked lips began to mutter nonsense. She called for her father, her mother. They had died in a famine, leaving behind only Xiaolan, a half-starved little monkey of a child whom I had picked up and brought home. She said meeting me was the luckiest thing in her life. But I had dragged her into this nightmare. That thought steeled my resolve. Xiaolan had to live. Whatever it took, we would survive. From inside the temple came the sounds of men grunting and shouting obscenities. I took a deep breath and cried out, "Soldier?" The moment I spoke, a hand clamped tightly over my mouth. It was Concubine Li. Because she'd borne 2 sons, she used to strut around in front of my mother, who only had me, mocking and sneering. I had always hated her most in the manner. "Song Chunyan, are you crazy?" she hissed angrily. "You're going to ruin yourself for a maid? Think about it. If you do this, what will Qing Qi think of you?" I whimpered behind her hand. Then what should I do? What am I supposed to do? I couldn't let Xiaolan die. Who shouted just now? A soldier approached, fastening his belt, eyes scanning the crowd. Concubine Li didn't let go of me. Instead, she raised her voice and purred sweetly. "Sir, it was me. The rain's getting heavier. I was hoping you'd let me inside for some shelter." Her tone was coy, and the rain had washed the dust from her face, revealing her still striking beauty. The soldier smirked, saliva dripping from his mouth. "Keep your head down and don't move. I'll save you both," Concubine Li whispered, then let go of me. Her ropes were untied, and she was taken inside. The women behind us spat at her. Shameless. Just look at her slutty face. Good thing her son is dead. If he saw this, he'd die of shame. I kept my head down, holding Xiaolan close, tears streaming down my face. The next morning, the rain stopped. Concubine Li was tossed out. She couldn't stand. Crawling over to me, her entire body was bruised and battered, not a single patch of uninjured skin. She reached out and opened her hand. A packet of fever medicine lay inside. "Give it to her quickly," she said. I carefully fed the powder to Xiaolan and scooped some rainwater from the grass nearby to help her swallow it. "Thank you, Aunt Li," I said solemnly. She blinked in surprise, then smiled. In a hoarse voice, she said, "You all call me Aunt Li. Those bastards in that temple called me a filthy whore. My real name is Zhengyong Li. I lived in the 4th house on Qingzhou Alley in the capital. My father was the loudest, most foul-mouthed scholar in the whole street. He used to lecture me all the time about obeying the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, about preserving my chastity. I entered the palace as a lady-in-waiting, then got too old and was married off to your father as a concubine. Lucky for me, both my father and your father died early. They didn't have to see me end up like this. I spent half my life fighting with your mother. Now that we're both heading down there, maybe she'll finally bow her head to me. You have to live. Don't let my sacrifice go to waste." Her voice grew weaker and weaker. The once arrogant concubine Li, Zhengyong Li, closed her eyes. There was a red mole on her earlobe. It had been bitten and torn. Her ear was ripped, barely hanging by a flap of skin. I pulled it off and dug a hole in the ground, burying that red mole, more brilliant than any gem in the world. I would live. No matter what, I would live. No one knew how long had passed before we finally arrived at the military camp in the northern frontier. More than half of the women who started the journey never made it. Some were tortured to death, some ended their own lives out of shame, and others died from illness. There were just too many. Another group of women had arrived half a day earlier than we did. Disheveled and gaunt, they huddled at the gates of the camp, waiting for the general to inspect and let them through. Xiaolan's pale face finally regained a trace of color. Gasping for breath, she said, "This is great. Mississippi young General Chung is here. We're saved." I held her up tightly, afraid to let go. If I did, the frail Xiaolan would collapse instantly. She had suffered so much and had never received proper care. She made it this far solely on sheer willpower to stay by my side. I patted her on the shoulder over and over, whispering, "Don't fall asleep. Just hold on a little longer. We're going to be okay. Chengqi. Chengqi. I repeated his name in my heart, as if drawing strength from it. The gates opened. We were led to a wide open training ground. All around us were soldiers fresh off drills, bare-chested, sweating, reeking. Their leering stares and shouts made me clutch Xiaolan tightly in fear. The sound of hooves approached. I looked up. Chengqi had arrived. He rode the sweat-blood horse gifted by my father, clad in gleaming silver armor that sparkled under the sunlight. To me, he looked like a god descending from the heavens. Chengqi. Chengqi. I called out weakly, but he didn't hear. He continued riding ahead. Xiaolan, do I look ugly right now? Is my face really dirty? She shook her head and, with effort, lifted her hand to brush my hair aside. She whispered, "Miss is the most beautiful." Chengqi was scanning the crowd in front of him, like he was searching for someone. Seeing his anxious expression, I tried to lift my hand, but the pain was too much. Yenner. He was calling my name. Chengqi was looking for me. Tears that I'd held back for days came streaming down. I saw him dismount and run in our direction. I endured the pain and reached out to him. Smack. A crisp slap echoed in the air. Chengqi struck my hand away. The force knocked me to the ground. In disbelief, I turned to see him lifting another woman not far from me into his arms. Yinger, you've suffered so much. So that's who he was calling. Yinger, not me. The women around us froze, then instinctively stepped back, creating a space between the reunited couple and the pitiful sight of me and Xiaolan. Chengqi. My tears wouldn't stop. I wanted to speak, but only his name came out. Through the blur, I saw him carry the woman closer to me. I tried wiping my eyes to see his expression, but with the sun behind him, his face was hidden in shadow. I'm taking this woman. The rest divide them up as you will. He held the woman in his arms and didn't say a single word to me. Half a year ago, on the city walls, he rode past me and shouted for the whole capital to hear, promising to marry me upon his triumphant return. Half a year later, I sat in the dirt, looking up at him, and got nothing. The men behind him surged forward excitedly. Rough, filthy hands dragged at my stunned body. By the time I came to my senses, several men had already lifted me off the ground. Xiaolan. Not far away, Xiaolan was slumped unconscious over a soldier's shoulder. Let her go. Let Xiaolan go. My scream stopped Chengqi in his tracks. He turned around, and the soldiers around him halted as well. Chengqi. General Cheng. Please, I beg you, save Xiaolan. She's dying. She can't take any more of this. I broke free and knelt in front of his horse, knocking my head to the ground over and over. Chengqi. Please save Xiaolan, the one who used to run errands for you all over the capital. Save the girl you always teased and called a scruffy little brat. Save the one who never stopped singing your praises, calling you a peerless war god. Please, I'm begging you. He pressed his lips together and studied me carefully. Then he reached down and pulled the wooden hairpin from my hair. This one's got spirit. Be careful. Don't let her hurt you. He left that one sentence, pocketed my hairpin, and rode off. And this time, I finally saw the face of the woman in his arms. It was Huang, the dancer my father had recently taken into the household. Xiaolan. The overwhelming grief made me cough up blood and lose consciousness. I didn't know how much time had passed before a slap jolted me awake. The stench inside the barracks made me retch. After seeing how Chengqi had treated me, the soldiers showed no restraint. After several slaps, I could only lie there like a dead fish as they did whatever they pleased. The pain, it was unbearable. This must have been how Xiaolan and Aunt Li felt too. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I let you both suffer in my place. I don't know how much time had passed before I was wrapped in a blanket, naked, and sent out. When I opened my eyes again, dim light surrounded me, and Chengqi sat across from me. When he saw that I had woken up, he sighed and said with regret, "How did you not die on the road?" I hoarsely asked him, "Where is Xiaolan?" He replied nonchalantly, I don't know. She's probably dead. Seeing me sob uncontrollably, he showed his first smile since meeting me. Why don't you ask me why I treated you like this? Chung Chi's drastic change and deep hatred must have been because he believed my father's treasonous case and the death of his own father were linked. Chung Chi's father, General Chung Chingya, died in battle 8 years ago. When the sad news came, the frail Chung Chi picked up his father's great sword. In just a few years, he took up his father's legacy, guarding the borders. Now, after years of preparation, the Hu people were strong and formidable, and the court hadn't won a battle in ages. The borders had been compromised time and again. After Chung Chi took over, though he suffered more defeats than victories, he still gave people hope and was hailed as the young god of war. He once said he had 2 wishes. One was to marry me. The second was to wipe out the barbarians and avenge his father. You didn't ask, so I assume you guessed it. 8 years ago, in the Battle of Luanjiang, people said my father was stubborn and reckless. But the truth is, someone was a traitor, deliberately giving my father an ambush strategy and tipping off the Hu people. That treasonous, heartless, and vile traitor was your father, Song Tan, the Grand Marshal of the Song family. My father spent his life on the battlefield, and after his death, he was left with the reputation of a reckless general. My mother was so heartbroken by this that she's been bedridden ever since. I was deceived by your Song family, thinking your kindness was a favor, but didn't realize the ones who ruined me were the Song family. I closed my eyes, unwilling to look at him. 8 years ago, Chung Chi, because of his late father's reputation as a reckless general, had a hard life. He nearly lost his house to others. Back then, my father, remembering his friendship with Chung Chingya, took pity on his orphaned family and sheltered them. It was during that time that I became close to him, and feelings started to grow. The rumors in the capital were that he was a child husband raised by our Song family, and every time I heard that, I would end up fighting with others. I knew he had a lot of pride, so to save his face, I often brought him homemade food, cheered for him when he practiced martial arts, and slowly, everyone came to know how deeply I cared for him, no longer making jokes about him being a child husband or a man who married into the family. Later, with my father's recommendation, he joined the army and came back with a victory in his first battle. I prepared a welcome banquet for him several times, but it was repeatedly delayed, and the food was wasted until the evening of the second day before he finally showed up. Proud of his success, he didn't apologize or offer any explanation. Instead, he excitedly bragged about his bravery on the battlefield and his glory after returning to the capital. I listened quietly, genuinely happy for him. For the first time, he seemed completely open in front of me, showing his true self. I should have known then. What Chung Chi truly wanted wasn't me, but his inflated sense of pride and the need for others' praise to validate his self-worth. Looking at our relationship purely from an emotional standpoint, he must have felt more exhilarated than sorry when he saw me in such a pitiful state. That was the moment I truly saw him. My heart died in an instant. I weakly asked, "Where's the evidence?" He chuckled lightly and said, "Song Chunyan, how did I never notice you were so shameless before? You've fallen to this state and you're still hoping to argue and ask me for evidence. You should ask the emperor for it. Ask the Ministry of Justice. Ask the tens of thousands of soldiers on the Luanjiang shore. Even if I die, you should let me die with a clear conscience. Chung Chi, I don't need you to give me evidence. I haven't seen the letters of conviction, and I don't know what the signs of treason were. I just know that when my father was taken away, he shouted that he was innocent. I heard that even before his execution, he kept insisting on his innocence. Song Tan is not innocent." He gave a malicious smile. "Otherwise, why would the empress, who deeply cares for you as her daughter, insist on putting him to death?" "What did you say?" I demanded loudly, my voice breaking with emotion. "Do you know something? Was it the empress?"
Why?
"Tell me." By now, I still thought you might have changed a little, but I didn't expect you to still be such a spoiled young lady. I'm not bothering with you anymore. I see that you'll never get the truth in this life. With that, he turned to leave. Then let me see Huang. Cheng-Chi's attitude toward Huang made it clear she knew something about this matter. I struggled to lift the blanket, revealing my battered body. Cheng-Chi glanced at me and immediately turned his head away. Don't worry. I won't do anything to her now. Cheng-Chi, both my parents are dead, Xiaolan is dead, and you don't want me anymore. I've been humiliated like this. I can't live anymore. Before I die, can you at least let me die knowing the truth? Although I spoke pitifully, my heart didn't feel that way. I needed to understand what had happened, and if I had to die, I would make sure you all became ghosts. I lowered my head, hiding the hatred in my eyes, and put on a pathetic, heartbroken expression. Cheng-Chi didn't agree to my request. He walked up to me, pressed his hand onto my shoulder, and applied pressure. Huaying's father was my father's deputy general. He died protecting my father, sustaining over 30 arrows and still refusing to fall. At that time, your cowardly father was still in the capital, indulging in luxury. To seek revenge, she bore humiliation and sacrificed herself for Song Tan. And you still think you're the only one who's pitiful? Do you think everyone should listen to you? I'll tell you this. Your suffering isn't enough. The 5,000 soldiers and their families who died at Luanjiang will never forgive you. With that, he called someone to take me back to the camp and place me in the brothel tent. How laughable. I had been so immersed in the love between Cheng-Chi and me that I hadn't realized what a foolish person he was. Hua Ying had already infiltrated before the raid on the Grand Marshal's residence. At that time, Cheng-Chi was still in the capital, and they hadn't crossed paths yet. What evidence did she have back then? Who was helping her in secret? Though I still hadn't seen Huang, Cheng-Chi's words confirmed that my current direction was right. And why should I want the fallen soldiers to forgive me? Not to mention whether my father was innocent. As a woman from a noble family, I had never studied military tactics, nor did I involve myself in court politics, let alone interfere with battlefield strategies. Back in the capital, no one blamed the 5,000 lost souls on the son of that reckless general. Instead, my father, fearing that the burden might weigh on him, had often spoken with him to console him. Now, he had placed that heavy burden squarely on my shoulders. If I'm not forgiven, so be it. If the souls of the deceased truly wander the world, I hope that my departed loved ones can come and see me. Father, mother, I am so tired. Back in the tent, the women were crying in unison. Upon seeing me, the former most esteemed young lady of the house, thrown in here after being ravaged, their cries quieted a bit. Aunt Shuang, who had served my mother, saw me and, holding back her tears, fed me some water, her voice filled with sorrow. Miss, you've suffered so much. I cleared my throat, shook my head, and then spoke loudly. To all my sisters, aunts, and younger cousins, I am so sorry that you have had to endure such great suffering because of the Song family. We have all come to this place after enduring hardship, and I believe you are all strong-hearted and determined to survive. Now that we've fallen to this place, there is no longer any distinction between masters and servants, nor any division between nobility and lowliness. We all have the same goal, to survive. If we pit the helpless against each other, then how are we any different from those who have tormented us? Once I finished speaking, I couldn't help but cough, and the blanket I had on slipped, revealing my battered body. Seeing this, the women's cries slowly stopped, and they grew quieter. The night was deep, and I forced myself to sleep. The next day, the soldiers were drilling, and the women in the camp had the day off to rest. They seemed much calmer than the day before and silently began to dress and wash up. I had no clothes left, only the worn-out blanket on me. Li Yingyang's former maid, Biyun, came over and handed me a clean set of clothes without saying a word. She left after placing them down. My body ached terribly. After changing, I lay back on the cot, only to suddenly hear a commotion outside. Aunt Shuang crouched behind the curtain for a moment, then returned to sit beside me with a troubled look on her face. Curious, I asked her what had happened, but she seemed unwilling to speak. Finally, an old woman couldn't hold it in anymore and spoke up. What does it matter now? Yesterday, Those soldiers who bullied you were boasting everywhere about how they had been with General Cheng's woman, even claiming they had made him wear a green hat. Someone overheard and reported them. Now those men are going to have their heads chopped off by the angry general. She added, I think General Cheng is so angry because he might still feel something for you. When she saw the marks on my neck, she stopped talking. Cheng Chi no longer had any feelings for me. It was his pride that had been insulted, which had made him angry. Thankfully, after that incident, I was not taken out of the camp for several days. Now, the only thing left to me was my identity as the last surviving member of the Song family. It wasn't long before Huaying came to find me. Contrary to her name, Huaying was a woman who seemed very confident and capable. She was tall and slender, with honey-colored skin and dark, sparkling eyes like a deer in the mountains. She had a completely different charm from the women of the capital. No wonder my father, who had entered his years of tranquility and had little desire for worldly matters, had brought her into the house. 2 days after she arrived, disaster struck the house, and I had to suspect that she played a role in it. How should I address you? Should I call you Aunt Huaying or Missing? Don't speak to me like that. I have nothing to do with your father's case. Just call me Huaying. I'm only a few years older than you. She laughed bitterly, self-deprecating. Doesn't seem like it, huh? I look so mature, but who would have thought I'm not even 20? I didn't believe her. I still didn't understand what she was about to say. When my father died in battle, I was even younger than you. She smiled, and the corners of her eyes and brows held a seductive charm. Before that, I used to run wild in the streets. My biggest wish was to grow up quickly and marry the boy I liked, and travel with him across the world for trade. Later, my father died, and my stepmother sold me into a rich family to be a maid. Unfortunately, that family wasn't as good as the Taifu mansion. Her voice grew softer, as though lost in thought. Back then, how I wished someone would come and save me. I waited and waited. Even the old woman from the alley where I used to sit in the sun became part of my fantasies. I imagined that one day she would come to save me, shaking her cane. As she spoke, she laughed through her tears. Funny, isn't it? In the end, no one came. I had to save myself. When I was your age, I killed 13 people in that household and escaped. Speaking of this, Song Chunyan, when the empress came to rescue you, why didn't you go with her? Seeing my pale face, she asked, Are you scared now, Song Chunyan? Do you still feel sorry for yourself? I shook my head, retorting, I've never felt sorry for myself. I only feel wronged. At this point, I've accepted all the suffering that's come to me, whether I deserved it or not. My Song family, with over 30 men, has already been killed, and I'm the only daughter left to survive. This great crime was decided in just 5 days. Even the case of a son of the Zhang family being caught for horse-riding assault on the street didn't get settled so quickly. But the strange thing is, no one has spoken up about this oddity. I was tired of beating around the bush and asked directly, You knew the Empress came looking for me, so you must be working for her. In this case, what role did the Emperor and Empress play? And what role did you play? Huang looked at me intently and smiled. I called you here to see a joke. But you surprised me. You're much sharper and smarter than I expected. But now, in this situation, being clever won't save you. Show me your skills. If you're worthy, I will tell you all the truth. Just then, Ching Chi burst into the room, grabbing Huaying and pulling her behind him. He angrily questioned me. Who let you in here? Song Chunyan. The guilt of your Song family has already been confirmed. Why are you still trying to argue for that foolish fantasy of yours and expose others' wounds? Expose whose wounds? Huaying? I saw her hide behind Qingqi, flashing me a smile that was unmasked. I couldn't help but laugh at Qingqi's foolishness. They've played you for a fool, and yet you still think of yourself as some kind of hero saving the day? I didn't argue or expose the truth. I couldn't be bothered to exchange more words with Qingqi and dragged my weary body back. Chunyan, wait a moment. Huang called out behind me, her tone delicate and exaggerated. How disgusting. She hadn't spoken to me like this back at the Song residence. This is an ointment for reducing inflammation and swelling. You should apply it considering what you've been through. It's important to take care of yourself. Cheng Chi's face turned pale. He must have been reminded of the rumors spreading around about the green hat he was supposedly wearing. Huang, you're so kind, he sneered. She's already been ruined. Does she even care about nurturing herself? I ignored him, took the ointment, and left without looking back. Did he think these insults would break me? They wouldn't. After everything that's happened, I've come to understand. The pain in my body feels no different than the scars on my wrist. Apply the medicine, and it will heal. Time will heal it. These past few days, it felt as if a storm had risen on the sea. Apart from the sunken ships being damaged, everything else became calm once it passed. As the only survivor of the shipwreck, I just want to find out who stirred up the storm. Hua Ying said she wanted to see my methods. I lay on my bed, pondering her words. What methods? Against whom? The next day, I saw several familiar faces outside the camp of the camp prostitutes. The turned-up nostrils, the black mole between their brows, the sparse hair, and their disgusting, lecherous aura. It was them, the guards who had abused Xiaolan and caused Li Yinyang's death. They saw me, but didn't approach. They must have heard about how the soldiers who abused me were killed. I walked up to them and asked, "Want to play military officers?" They were so frightened, they hurriedly waved their hands and walked away. After some inquiries, I learned that these men had been assigned to the fire squad. Since they were soldiers from the capital, each had some background, so they immediately kicked out the previous people in the camp's kitchen. Now, they were firmly in control. Biyun noticed me staring at them and came over to tell me that she overheard them arguing about who had gone out in the middle of the night to bring in a supply of vegetables. The military had enough provisions, but vegetables and similar items were bought from local vendors. The camp was far from a nearby town, so for safety reasons, supply trucks would arrive a day in advance. Who would bring them in the middle of the night? That night, I hid by the kitchen and waited for the vegetable truck. Before it got close, I already smelled a rotten odor. The truck was filled with rotten vegetables and spoiled meat. The manager of the delivery had taken money and promised the cooks that as long as the food was cooked, it would be as good as fresh. The conditions were tough here, and most ingredients were stewed with seasoning, so after cooking, no one could tell whether it was fresh or spoiled. But what if we ate something spoiled? My mother was a renowned doctor, and I knew a little about herbs. Back in the tent, I woke up Shuanggu, and together we searched for some herbs from the northwest. This herb grows everywhere in the northwest, but no one wants to eat it because its stems are bitter, and consuming it causes severe diarrhea. However, it's highly resilient, and it grows everywhere, even under the bed. We quickly gathered a small handful. It was enough for what we needed. The kitchen staff had just arrived and didn't know about the herb's effects. The next day, several of the women were sent to cook. Shuanggu tightly wrapped the herbs and stuffed them into the legs of her pants before heading out. I worried she might get caught, but I couldn't go with her as the kitchen staff blocked me, so I anxiously waited in the tent. Half an hour after lunch passed, the camp was unusually noisy. I knew the plan had succeeded. The matter caused quite a stir, and it wasn't until night that Shuanggu was finally allowed back. Because of this incident, all the people in the kitchen were detained. There was no real interrogation, and the women admitted that the food had caused the soldiers to suffer from food poisoning. They had been beaten and forced to continue cooking. To prevent the women from speaking out, the cooks had kept them there under threat and coercion. The vegetable seller was also arrested. An enraged Cheng Chi had these people executed in front of the entire army. Hearing the news, I looked up at the sky. Xiaolan, Li Yinyang, and all the women who had died from their abuse. Do you see? They're dead. You've been here in the camp for 2 or 3 days. Because of you, Cheng Chi has already executed nearly 10 people. You really do have methods. Huang called me over. This time, Cheng Chi was busy dealing with military discipline and didn't have time to interrupt us. You haven't left any traces behind, though. I figured it out, but I'll keep this from Cheng Chi. I knew someone must have seen Shuanggu and me going out to gather herbs in the middle of the night. There was no need to hide it. It wasn't strange for someone to have informed her. You need to tell me the truth. If I tell you now, you'll be powerless to take revenge. 3 days from now, the Hu people will celebrate their festival, and the army will give the soldiers a day off. If you can escape then, I'll tell you everything. I suppressed my anger and replied, how do I know this isn't a trap set by you and Qingqi to eliminate me under the guise of helping me? She seemed to find it funny, laughing and saying, you really think Qingqi and I are working together? Miss Song, you're not the only one who refused the empress's offer. This implied Hua Ing had also come here willingly? She wasn't like me, seeking help from Qingqi, as if he were a lifeline. What, then, was her purpose for coming to the camp? Was she targeting me? Or Qingqi? I hated this feeling, being trapped in the fog, unable to see the truth, and sinking deeper into confusion. 3 days from now, if I manage to escape and meet with you, will you really tell me the truth? Or will you keep delaying it like you're doing now? Knowing the truth means you must take revenge, but first, you need to stay alive. I returned to the tent and cried bitterly. She said I would take revenge, so that meant my father had been wronged. All of my family, hundreds of people, had been wronged. The self-doubt of recent days vanished in an instant. Flower Shadow was right. So long as I stayed in Qingqi's camp, I wouldn't be able to do anything. Qingqi had gone out to inspect the terrain and would only return on the 3rd day. After crying, I put on the gorgeous dress Flower Shadow had given me and walked around the camp. The guards didn't dare stop me. Seeing my bold appearance, they probably thought I had regained Qingqi's favor. He, as the general, had turned the whole camp into his own little kingdom. There were very few people left in the camp brothel, and the only place without guards was behind the brothel, surrounded by a high fence studded with sharp spikes. After all, women were easier to catch than deserters. I kicked the fence, making a loud noise with the wire. Not far away, the other part of the fence also rattled, attracting the attention of the soldiers. I quickly walked away. The fence was so loosely constructed that the wedge stuck into the ground must have been unstable. Frost Ant had already been assigned to work in the kitchen. That evening, she told me that 3 days later, the camp would hold a barbecue in the manor of the Hu people. The cooks had already gone to nearby farms to collect livestock to slaughter. Truly, this was an army of the young war god, with such abundant military pay. While soldiers elsewhere couldn't even get white buns, they were already eating meat to their heart's content. Who knew how confident they would be after the Hu people's rest period? Soon, the 3rd day arrived, and the camp had a day off. There weren't many people left in the brothel. I changed into the pink dress I used to love, tied my hair into a high bun, applied lipstick, and carefully dressed myself up. Looking into the copper mirror, I looked just like I did back in the Taisher mansion. Qingqi had returned. My chance was tonight. Growing up in the capital, I had once been curious about Qingqi's military life, imagining it through the snippets of his letters. In my imagination, it was nothing like the miserable reality I was facing now. Soldiers, red-faced from drinking, were either sitting or lying down, making crude jokes, and some even started fighting. Was this really the army of my dynasty, or just a chaotic mess? I walked through the scattered bonfires, past soldiers who were stumbling and drunk. When I passed by a group of filthy hands that had touched me countless times, I saw Qingqi sitting at the highest seat. His face was slightly flushed, clearly drunk, as he watched 2 soldiers wrestling below. Through the flickering firelight, I rushed towards him in my splendid clothes. The soldiers who were behind me, having been pricked by my hairpin, cursed and followed me. Qingqi, Qingqi. I ran into the middle of the arena and was pulled back by someone from behind. He was so drunk that his eyes were unfocused. He didn't realize he had walked into the carefully prepared stage I had set. Now, I stood before Qingqi, looking noble, yet trampled upon. My voice was sharp, with tears in my eyes. Qingqi, please save me. When I was pulled into his arms, tears streamed down my face. This was my last cry for help. It was too late, Qingqi. I knelt beside him, lowering my head, waiting on him with small gestures. He seemed to enjoy it, his gaze growing even hotter, before finally lifting me to carry me away. Earlier, the mood had been tense because he had just executed the soldier who had humiliated me. But now, with his actions, a thunderous cheer erupted from the crowd. Like a beast being dragged away, Chung-chi proudly walked around the arena. I believed that in his heart, the titles son-in-law of the Song family and child husband that had always weighed him down were finally cast aside. At the expense of my dignity, under the red candlelight, I used my lips to feed him pastries containing fava beans, pushing them deep into his throat. In his drunken, lustful state, he swallowed the food that would soon make him feel ill, and his body started to swell. His breathing grew heavy. Watching him in this state, I felt nothing but calm. In my current situation, I didn't have the poison that could kill him, nor could I poison an entire army's general before a battle. Until the matter was settled, I needed to keep him alive. My pink dress had been torn, and I went to Ching-Chi's clothing chest, searching through it. I folded the long sleeves and pants, fastening the wide waistband with a belt, before grabbing a dagger. Once I was done, I put on a helmet to conceal my face. Chung-Chi tried to grab me, but his hands instinctively squeezed his own throat. His limp body could no longer stand, and he could only utter a few vague, heavy syllables. "Beg me, and I'll save you. Say it, Song Chunyan, beg me to save you. Say it, and I will save you. Say it. Beg me." I slapped his swollen, red face, gritting my teeth as I spoke. Chung-Chi's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at me, but he was powerless. "Please, please, Song Chunyan." I slapped him with my other hand. "Why beg me? Keep talking. Please save me." Seeing the man crawling on the ground like a dog, I snorted coldly, stood up, and lit his tent with the red candle. As the flames grew, I blended into the panicking crowd and made my way to the iron fence behind the brothel. Biyun had already been digging here for half a day. The fence's ground stakes were flimsy, sticking to wet soil, and came out easily. I entered the brothel, where the women who hadn't been taken out were resting. "The fence behind is broken. If any of you want to escape, don't make any noise. We leave together. Those who don't want to go can drink the soup Aunt Frost brought. It will make you fall into a deep sleep without involving you." I turned and left, leaving the room full of silent women behind. The barbed wire was prickly, so I wrapped a cloth around my head and face, slipping through the gap I had made. The wind howled through the night. The air, plants, and sounds from beyond the fence all seemed filled with life. I breathed a sigh of relief, not feeling the pain from the wounds on my body. Bai Yun and Aunt Shuang lined up and came out. I saw several women approach as well. At the front was the maid Xiao Yan from my brother's room. Her elegant and refined face bore injuries, and she walked with a limp, clearly having endured much abuse recently. "Miss, what will you do after you escape?" Her voice was weak, barely audible over the howling wind. "Clear the name of my Song family." I mustered all my strength to say these words, and a strong urge to cry rose in my chest. She took a jade clasp from her sleeve and handed it to me. "Miss, I believe in you, and I believe in my father and younger brother. They wouldn't rebel. This is young Master Chunhes. He always said he wished to travel the mountains and rivers and not be confined to the court. Miss, after you clear the Song family's name, please help me fulfill young Master's wish and see the sights he never had the chance to see." I didn't take it and said, "You should take him to see it yourself." She shook her head. "Lu Posey and the others have already gone to warn the soldiers. You must hurry. I'll hold them off here." Before she finished speaking, the sound of hurried footsteps reached us. I took the jade clasp, let out a long breath, and said, "Don't worry." Bai Yun had caught up, but Aunt Shuang, with her fuller figure, couldn't get through. She smiled at me and said, "Miss, I will go reunite with the madam first." I ran desperately, the wind carrying a strong scent of blood. I pulled Bai Yun along, not daring to look back, and kept running toward the northern hillside, to the crooked tree flower Shadow had mentioned. I clenched my teeth so tightly that the taste of blood filled my mouth. I dared not blink, fearing my tears might fall and spoil the last bit of strength I had. After a long struggle, I finally reached the hill. Flower Shadow, dressed in black, was waiting for me outside the carriage. Bai Yun, we've made it out." The warmth in my hand suddenly slipped away. I turned back, and Bai Yun collapsed to the ground. 2 sharp arrows were lodged in her back. I couldn't understand how she had managed to follow me all the way here despite such serious injuries. She only collapsed after seeing that I was safe. Blood poured from Bai Yun's mouth. She pushed my hand away as I tried to help her onto the carriage, shook her head, and closed her eyes. I had no time to grieve. I severed the arrows and, with Flower Shadow's help, lifted her onto the carriage. When the door opened, Xiaolon was sitting inside, looking at me with tears in her eyes. That day, I saved her. Flower Shadow's words were brief, and she cracked the whip to start the carriage. I sat in the carriage. The dim night cast eerie shadows from the trees, which seemed like ghosts, trying to pounce on us before being thrown behind. Once I had calmed myself, Flower Shadow began to explain the truth behind the treason case. 8 years ago, in the Battle of Luanjing, due to General Cheng's reckless advancement, our army suffered heavy losses and could no longer continue fighting the Hu people. The emperor's legitimate son, the 10-year-old Yuan Yao, along with 3 cities, was sent to the northern border. Flower Shadow had fled to the Hu lands after killing someone and, by chance, became Yuan Yao's maid. In the following years, the imperial family had no male heirs. Apart from a few princesses, the emperor only had 1 son in the Hu lands. Eventually, the emperor proposed to bring Yuan Yao back to the capital. After years of defeats, not only had the people suffered, but officials, led by Song Taiwei, opposed escalating the war just to retrieve a prince. In the midst of all this, the emperor secretly reached an agreement with the northern border's royal family. If they couldn't exchange cities for people, they could exchange people for people. This person was Song Tan, who implemented water conservancy projects, reduced taxes, and greatly expanded the imperial examinations, helping revive a court that had once been in a state of decline. For 2 consecutive years, at the emperor's birthday banquets, many foreign envoys gathered around Song Taiwei, showering him with praise. My father was cautious and reported every conversation he had with the envoys, until last year, when an envoy said to the emperor, "Along the way, all the scholars we encountered were students of the Song family. Song Taiwei is truly the backbone of the country." Just this one sentence, spoken into the suspicious ears of the emperor, set off the Song family's downfall. Flower Shadow, as Yuan Yao's person, knew that Yuan Yao, who was approaching the end of his 10-year term, was unwilling to return to the capital early and break his promise. But even if it weren't for him, the emperor had already begun plotting the extermination of the Song family. The letter written by the enemy general had already been hidden in the artificial mountain in the lake before my family was accused. No one, not even my mother and I, knew how to open the secret room. Who had opened it and placed it inside? Qingqi had investigated your family many times and had already reported the mechanism of the door lock to the emperor. The best craftsmen spent many days figuring out how to unlock it. Flower Shadow explained, and I gritted my teeth in hatred. It turned out that before the battle, he had already begun plotting against my family, all while pretending to make promises in front of the entire city. Then what about you? As a hostage maid, how did you end up in the capital, thousands of miles away? After the empress and the crown prince learned of the plan, they sent me to inform Song Taiwei. But it was too late. As soon as I met him, the emperor accelerated his plan and caught the net early. If Qingqi hadn't previously told me that the empress wanted to eliminate my family, I would have believed her. It wasn't because I trusted Qingqi more, but because there were flaws in Flower Shadow's explanation. I pretended to understand, showing a grateful expression. But in my heart, I thought the empress and Yuan Yao were truly playing a good game of chess. What a righteous and unyielding Yuan Yao. What a loyal and protective empress. If it was timely, Yuan Yao would be upright, deserving of all the officials' admiration and the people's praise. If not, Yuan Yao could return early to secure his position as the heir to the throne. The lives of my entire Song family rested on the whims of their royal family. Then why did you save me? Why are you telling me all this? She turned her head and glanced at me, her eyes sparkling. Because you didn't let someone else die in your place. I remembered a maid who had stood beside the empress in the prison. One of them was tall and had lowered her head. The maid who was supposed to replace you survived. After returning to the palace, she saved her mother, who had tried to commit suicide. I think you shouldn't die. So what? Are you going to help me clear my name? In the world, when a case is overturned, the truth is revealed under the clear skies. But if that day never comes, and the world is turned upside down, is there still hope for justice? After the mission was completed, Huaying did not return to the northern frontier nor stay in the capital waiting for Yuan Yao's return. Instead, she followed me, waiting until I had endured all the suffering before revealing the truth to me. She certainly wasn't just speaking out of impulsive sentiment. Huaying smiled and said, "If the day doesn't break, let's make it break. If the world is upside down, we'll set it right." With swift horses, we quickly arrived at the gate of a secluded house. Inside, as I had expected, was Yuan Yao. He was much more refined than I had imagined, with a face as smooth and gentle as jade, exuding a calm and graceful aura. Though it was just an appearance. In the northern frontier, only the most ruthless survived. "Spring Yen, you've suffered," Yuan Yao said with a concerned tone, just like his mother's. Seeing me supporting Biyun, he quickly instructed someone to take her to tend to her injuries. I sighed with relief. The night's exertions had drained me, and my vision blurred before I collapsed into Xiaolan's arms. I had a long dream. In it, the Song mansion was as lively as it used to be. I sat in the corridor, watching them quarrel and laugh, happy together. But soon, the sky darkened, and everyone shed their flesh, turning into skeletal remains. In the howling wind, their cries echoed across the land. I opened my eyes, turning my head to look. Outside the window, the spring scenery was as beautiful as the capital. "I didn't expect to see the rare cherry blossoms bloom here," I murmured. Xiaolan, sitting at my bedside, chuckled softly. "Miss, we are no longer in the northern frontier. We've entered the domain of Shantung." I was surprised. "How long have I been asleep?" 24 hours, she replied. I had slept an entire day and night. Sitting up, I realized we were on a boat. No wonder we had reached Shantung so quickly. After freshening up, I went to the outer room. Yuan Yao was having a meal. "Miss Song, I truly apologize. I've been away from home for many years and longed for my family, so I didn't consider your health and pushed on with our journey. I hope you don't hold it against me." "Spring Yen would never blame you," I replied. After exchanging pleasantries, he pointed to the fields outside the window. The terraced fields on the hillsides were a measure proposed by Song Taiwei. "This action has fed tens of thousands of people in the mountains and is truly a remarkable achievement." He sighed. "Who would have thought it would end this way?" I covered my face and cried in response. He handed me a handkerchief, speaking gently, "Heaven has shown mercy. At least one bloodline of the Song family remains. I will certainly help you restore justice for Taiwei." His words, though not directly stated, clearly indicated that he intended to oppose the emperor for me. The emperor was under 40, still in his prime, and there was no guarantee he wouldn't have another child soon. If that happened, no matter how capable Yuan Yao was, it wouldn't be certain he would ascend to the throne. Just as his parents couldn't stand my father's latent threat and hurried to eliminate him, their son, too, couldn't bear the suppression of his father and had grown desperate to claim the throne. I pretended to be unaware of the truth behind it all, showing a false appearance of hatred for the emperor and gratitude for the empress and Yuan Yao. We traveled by water and arrived at the capital in less than 10 days. Yuan Yao protected me well, and seeing the great lengths he went to in bringing me to him via Huaying, I knew I was the key piece in his plan. The capital was even more bustling than when I left. Biyun's parents were still in the outskirts, but I didn't dare send her back. Even though Yuan Yao promised to protect her, now, apart from Xiaolan and Biyun, I trusted no one. On the surface, I pretended to be unwilling to part with her. Hua Ying stood by, watching me put on the act in silence, like the other maids. I was arranged by Yuan Yao to stay in a mansion near the capital. Standing in the courtyard, I could see the tall red walls and golden eaves not far away. Where once I had returned there like it was home, now it felt like a grand prison. The emperor's only son had returned to the capital with great fanfare. On one hand, the noble families behind the empress were pacified, while on the other hand, the return of the hostage prince gave the people a false impression that the nation had become prosperous. I hid among the crowd, watching Yuan Yao as he paraded through the streets in a sedan, surrounded by cheering citizens, many of whom were even wiping away tears. Yuan Yao appeared very approachable, with a smiling face. I, too, waved and smiled, cheering along with the crowd. News of my escape must have reached the capital by now, as there were soldiers on the streets holding my portrait, searching for me. However, within 2 days it stopped, likely because Yuan Yao had intervened behind the scenes. I had Xiaolan disguise herself and go out to gather information while I stayed in the mansion to look after Biyun. 2 more maids stayed behind as well, likely to keep an eye on us. To my surprise, before Xiaolan returned, someone unexpected came to see me. It was the empress. After her son's return, she seemed in a good mood, even forgetting what she had done to me when she spoke to me with a warm smile. "Yenner, you're back," she said in the same gentle tone as before when I went to the palace. My eyes reddened as I threw myself into her arms, like a child who had suffered great injustice, seeking refuge in her mother's embrace. She relished it, saying with a teasing tone, "I told you to stay in the capital with me, but you insisted on going to that cold, harsh place. Only after all that suffering did you come back. If it weren't for Yao telling me, I wouldn't have known you were back. Why didn't you tell me when you returned?" I couldn't sleep, thinking about the hardships you've endured. My tears wouldn't stop. It seemed Yuan Yao hadn't told her that I already knew the truth. I held back tears and began to sob loudly. After the fake pleasantries, she told me to return to the palace with her. I shook my head, my cheeks flushed with shyness as I said, "I am willing to follow the empress into the palace and serve His Highness, the crown prince, in secrecy." The empress's smile almost faltered. She patted my hand with a forceful grip. If she wanted her son to ascend the throne sooner, she needed to keep me alive. When Yuan Yao had just returned to the capital, before he could take any action, good news came from the palace. A palace maid was pregnant. She had kept it hidden until her growing belly became obvious, at which point she admitted that the child was the emperor's. She was a new maid in the palace of Consort Jean, having entered less than 6 months ago. This was a significant matter, so Consort Jean reported it to the emperor. Although it was not yet confirmed if the child was a son, the emperor, who had not had any heirs in a long time, was overjoyed. He immediately dispatched a number of trusted servants to care for the young maid, making sure nothing went wrong. This news was conveyed to me by a letter from Consort Jean, which also mentioned that the emperor had sternly warned the queen in front of all the other consorts. He said that if the child did not survive, he would hold her entirely responsible. I smiled when I saw the letter. It seemed that the emperor was not unaware of the queen's actions. The bigger the commotion, the better. Consort Jean had never liked me. I had once been aligned with the queen's faction, her political enemy. 10 years ago, shortly after Consort Jean entered the palace, she became pregnant. Her unprecedented favor and her family's powerful connections helped her rise through the ranks, and her position was elevated by 3 levels when she became pregnant, greatly threatening the queen's status. But that winter, she fell into water, losing her child and, tragically, her ability to conceive again. Consort Jean claimed that young Yuan Yao had pushed her, but everyone in the queen's palace said he had not left the palace at that time and had been sleeping. All the palace attendants present were punished and executed, and the matter was eventually closed as an accident. A soon-to-retire prime minister and an unborn child could not compare to the powerful queen from a military family or her highly praised son. Consort Jean spent the next 10 years in resentment and regret. Lady Li, once a female official in her palace, was now her confidant, and Biyun was her maid. After recovering from her injuries under Xiaolan's care, Biyun secretly contacted an old palace maid who was on leave to pass on my message to Consort Jean. Now that we shared a common enemy, with Consort Jean seeking revenge for her decade-long grudge and my family's fallen souls needing solace, it was only natural to join forces. Now that I was inside the palace, I found it much easier to handle matters. After all, the enemies were within these towering red walls. The queen, furious, smashed several sets of cups in the palace, repeatedly insisting, "It's impossible that she's carrying the emperor's child." Impossible. Other palace attendants stepped forward to comfort her, but only I knew that she was telling the truth. Because the queen had secretly given the emperor infertility medicine. Years ago, when my mother and I dined in the palace, she warned me never to eat the palace meals again. She was the daughter of a former imperial physician. At the time, I was too young to ask further, but before she passed away in prison, she told me that the queen had been adding herbs that could cause infertility to the emperor's food. Since the emperor often dined with the queen's family to win their favor, the small doses over time had completely rendered him infertile. Later, when the emperor discovered the infertility, he had a thorough examination, but the cause could not be found due to the damage to his essence, and the matter was quietly set aside. The maid carrying the child was naturally not carrying the emperor's son, but she had been favored by him, and Consort Jean secretly killed the real father of the child and kept the child. When Yuan Yao returned to the capital, I, along with Consort Jean, planned to bring the pregnant maid forward. The queen, who now dared not openly claim the child wasn't the emperor's, was likely waiting for the maid to give birth before taking action. There were less than 3 months before the child would be born. Yuan Yao could not hold back any longer. He frequently entered the queen's palace, and they began arguing often. Once, I overheard him telling the queen in an agitated tone, "You want me to wait again? I've already set everything up. How much longer do you want me to wait?" Yuan Yao proved himself to be an ambitious politician. In a short period, he had accomplished much. When he entered the capital, he had already brought forged letters from the northern tribes as evidence for my father. He had also secretly teamed up with my father's former officials and associates to prepare for a joint appeal to clear my father's name in the treason case. He did not hesitate to share all of this with me, and I cooperated fully. To help him win over court officials, I personally wrote a letter about the injustice my family faced, detailing how my family had been wronged. Every word was filled with sorrow, and according to Yuan Yao, many officials were moved to tears when they read it. They had long felt guilty, but had not spoken out at the time due to pressure from the emperor's power. Now, with the tides turning, they were ready to join forces and help. After their argument, Yuan Yao stormed out, accidentally knocking over a palace maid who was carrying a bowl of bird's nest soup. The maid was so frightened that she trembled all over. Yuan Yao smiled and said, "There's no need to be so scared. I'll just go inside and explain to mother." But this is for Miss Yuing," the maid stammered. Yu Ying was the pregnant maid. Yuan Yao stepped on the remains of the bowl, and the silver spoon rolled under his foot, but didn't turn black. He turned to me and asked, "Why is mother sending supplements to that woman?" I smiled and replied, "The queen, as the head of the harem, is overjoyed that there is finally a child in the palace. She often sends servants to take care of Miss Yuing, hoping she can give birth to a healthy son." Yuan Yao, who didn't know about the queen's infertility medicine, had become distant from his parents after years of living as a hostage. When I said this, it wasn't hard for him, with his suspicious nature, to guess that the empress might have plans to raise the child herself after taking him back and claiming him as her own. 2 days later, Yuing miscarried after taking the supplements sent by the empress. She lost the child, a fully formed male infant. The emperor was furious and sealed off the Jinyang palace, while I had already escaped in advance. Yuan Yao thought this matter would not cause much of a stir, but He did not expect it to uncover even more. In the Empress's chambers, not only did they find the medicine that caused Yu Ying's miscarriage, but also an old prescription, one that contained ingredients to render a man infertile. The prescription had been written 8 years ago, the same year Yuan Yao went to the Huns, and since then, no children had been born in the palace. When the Empress was dragged out, I stood behind Yuan Yao, and the two of us stood in a pavilion not far from Jinyang Palace. Yuan Yao asked me, "Chun Yen, my mother was willing to drug my father for me. Do you think I underestimated her expectations of me?" I answered, "Most mothers love their children more than they realize, even more than the children think." My own mother was like that as well. The night was heavy with darkness as I secretly entered the cold palace. The once majestic Empress was now sitting on a pile of straw, her face swollen and her appearance haggard. Jean Fei and the other concubines who had suffered at her hands had already come to visit. When she saw me, her eyes lit up and she hurriedly called out, "Yenna, Yenna, you've come to see me." How laughable it was. She had once given me life outside the prison, and now I stood at her doorstep, watching her fall from grace. "Empress, stop calling me Yenner. I am from the Song family. You should call me Song Chun Yen, with my surname and my full name." "Yenna? Song Chun Yen, how did you become?" At this point, she still pretended to show me fake affection. "Surely you don't know how that prescription came about, right?" "It was you." "How did you know?" She stared at me in disbelief. I smiled and unwrapped a little paper packet, pulling out a small piece of oil paper. The meals in the Empress's palace were delicious. My mother had the chance to taste them once. "Do you remember? It was that one time when she discovered your secret." My mother didn't tell anyone, but before she died, she told me. She wanted me to use this secret to seek your mercy, to ask for a way out. I slowly unwrapped the oil paper, revealing the half pill of poison my mother had left. "Unexpectedly, I used it to exchange for your death." "I have wronged you in some way? Why did you try to kill me?" The Empress had the audacity to ask me such a question. "Because you first tried to destroy the Song family. The entire Song family, 83 souls, were sacrificed just to pave the way for your son. Your precious son caused Yu Ying's miscarriage and framed you. How do you feel? Was it worth it?" She rushed at me with her hair disheveled, trying to strangle me. I kicked her into the corner. I crouched down, angry, and asked, "Originally, Yuan Yao had just 2 years left before returning to the capital, but you couldn't wait even 2 years. You insisted on having my Song family's blood spilled to clear the path for your son. You even used Song Tan as a sacrifice to please the Huns. Do you think I didn't know you were the one who made the deal with them?" She laughed, her voice hoarse and unpleasant. "I thought the Song family only had you, a little girl, and couldn't stir up any trouble. If I had known, I should have let you die with your parents back then, or left you in that army, never to rise again." I pinched her face and shoved the poison into her mouth. She didn't struggle much before swallowing it, her mouth still cursing, "Song Ten should die. Song Ten should die." That day, it was his words about the country needing rest that sent my Yao away. He should die. The Empress died, her eyes wide open, her 7 orifices bleeding. No one bothered to arrange her appearance, and she died in a truly horrific way. The long-awaited child was lost, and the emperor finally made Yuan Yao the crown prince. When Yuan Yao heard of the empress's death, he cried for a while, and the ministers around him offered their condolences, praising him for his benevolence, filial piety, and loyalty. But in no time, he regained his composure and continued discussing the case of clearing his father's name. The key piece of evidence in the case was the enemy general's personal letter. Yuan Yao had already forged a collaboration with the Huns, and their general provided several letters, including correspondence between the emperor, the empress, and their Khan, which proved that the entire plot had been secretly planned by the emperor, the empress, and her maternal family. If the case were overturned, no one could imagine how big the consequences would be. I bowed deeply to them. No matter their intentions in helping me, they were aiding me. While we were frantically gathering evidence, the emperor's birthday feast was also approaching. Winter had arrived in the northern borders, and both sides had entered a ceasefire. Chengqi also returned to the capital to celebrate the emperor's birthday. Once, I had thought that the emperor did not resent him because of his father's actions, and I was happy that he had led the army for the emperor. But now, I realized he had already been loyal to the emperor. I stood behind the window of the tea house, watching him ride back into the capital. On either side of the road, girls covered their faces with handkerchiefs, shyly throwing flowers at him. His once fiancée, who had sworn in front of the entire city to marry him, was now of lowly status. He appeared unaffected, even more spirited as he returned to the city, declaring that he had moved on from the past and was single again. Xiaolon stared at him, grinding her teeth in hatred. I patted her on the back to comfort her. "It's fine. Let him be proud for 2 more days." True to my words, 2 days later, dozens of ministers didn't attend court and instead gathered outside the palace in front of the entire city, beating the drum of grievance for Song Taiwei. Even more extreme, one man smashed his head against a stone pillar outside the palace, shouting that he would die to prove Song Taiwei's innocence. The news quickly spread throughout the capital. By the time the emperor found out, the situation had already spiraled beyond control. Yuan Yao requested an investigation into the truth of the case, which only enraged the emperor even more. In front of the civil and military officials, the emperor smashed his head with a stone to silence him. But such anger only helped Yuan Yao gain more support. Inside the hall, all the ministers knelt together, and once so frightened to even breathe when the emperor changed his mood, they now repeated, "Please, Your Majesty, reinvestigate the case of Song Tan's treason. Please, Your Majesty, reinvestigate the case of Song Tan's treason." The unbroken cries echoed through the hall, reaching beyond the high red walls. I stood beneath the wall, tears streaming down my face. That afternoon, Chengqi was taken to the Ministry of Justice for interrogation. The once powerful young general, who could command the army, didn't last 5 days under Yuan Yao's hands before he confessed everything, including how he opened the Song family's secret room and hid the empress's letters. The investigation didn't reach the emperor's ears because after court that day, he was forced to suffer a stroke and rest in the Yangxin Hall. Huang led me back to the palace to see the emperor, and I knew that this world was about to change hands. The emperor lay on his wide dragon couch, his entire body immobile, with only his head and neck able to move. He was someone who enjoyed a life of luxury and placed great importance on health, so it was impossible for him to suddenly suffer a stroke in the year of the dragon and tiger. When I saw the palace maid forcing his mouth open and pouring medicine into him, I knew this was Yuan Yao's doing. He coughed, trying to spit out the medicine, but the palace maid held his head and pressed his mouth shut, forcing him to swallow it. I stood by the bed, and when he raised his head, he saw me. "Song Chunyan, how did you end up here?" "It was I who brought her here." Yuan Yao walked up from behind me, signaling for the servants to leave. He then stayed with me and Huaying. The vast hall was left with only 4 people, the emptiness filled with the howling wind from outside. Today is the emperor's birthday, and Chunyan has come to wish him a long life. May you have a kind father and a filial son, and enjoy a life of harmony. May you and your wife live in harmony and grow old together. May you live a long life and be remembered as a wise ruler for generations." After hearing these words, his eyes reddened with anger, and he cursed loudly. "How dare you, vile slave, wish me such things?" Yuan Yao let out a light laugh. "It seems my father's birthday blessings are not to your liking, Your Majesty. If you don't like her words, I can reverse them for you. Yuan Yao, I took great pains to bring you back, and this is how you repay me?" I stepped aside and watched as the father and son began to settle accounts. 8 years ago, during the Battle of Luanjiang, Cheng Qingya ignored the advice of his deputy, recklessly crossing the river and declaring war, which led to the deaths of 100,000 soldiers. Afterward, I was sent to the northern border with 2 cities. In the first few years, I kept hoping you and the empress would bring me back. But then I stopped hoping. Do you know why? The emperor trembled and said nothing. Because I discovered the truth behind the defeat at Luanjiang. The military power behind my mother kept growing, and it reached an overwhelming level. If the war had continued, the entire court would have shifted toward military dominance, and if I were made the crown prince, your throne would have been in danger. Chengqingye was intentionally defeated under your orders. The defeat weakened the court's military strength, cutting military supplies. Although you lost 100,000 soldiers, your throne was secure, right? I used to wonder how someone like you became emperor. I never imagined you would resort to such a method to shake the foundation of the country. The emperor's face turned red, but he couldn't speak. Later, my mother sent a letter saying she could use Song Taiwei's influence to bring me back to the capital. That's when I realized that after all these years, you hadn't changed. Fearing military officials, you sacrificed 100,000 soldiers. Fearing the civil officials, you had their families executed. You feared me growing stronger, so you sent assassins to the northern border to kill me. But what is it you truly fear? It is your own incompetence and foolishness. Deep down, you know you're not a good ruler, you don't belong on this throne, and so you worry day and night that someone will drag you off it. He took a step forward and lowered his head to look down at the emperor, who was lying on the bed like a useless body. From now on, you don't have to worry anymore, because your throne will belong to me. He lifted the emperor and threw him to the ground, as though discarding trash. Look up. The two women before you. One is the daughter of the soldiers who perished at Luanjiang, and the other is the daughter of Song Taiwei. Look at them and ask them, because of you, what has become of their lives? Huaying remained still. I stepped forward, held his head down, and forced him to kowtow several dozen times in the direction of the Song family estate. This kowtow is for me, Song Chunyan. This kowtow is for my mother, Jin Mingyu. This kowtow is for my brothers and younger brothers, Song Chun and Song Chunjia, Song Chunling, Song Chunming, whose lives were never given a chance to unfold. This kowtow is for all the innocent women in my family who were mistreated and died. And lastly, this kowtow is for my father, Song Tan, Song Taiwei. I pulled his hair fiercely and forced his head down to the ground, making him crash down again and again. The pain made the emperor cry out in agony. Even if your head falls off, you cannot atone for your sins. Tears blurred my vision. I seemed to lose all sense of reason until Huaying pulled me away. I don't know how long it took, but after I had calmed down, the emperor was dragged away by Huaying, and only Yuan Yao remained by my side. Your vengeance has first been on my mother, then on the emperor. Am I next? I didn't respond, feeling conflicted inside. At first, I had indeed planned to have the entire royal family, this cold and heartless trio, killed. Just like now, there were still a few highly skilled assassins hiding in the palace, ready to strike at Yuan Yao as soon as I gave the signal. Once I saw the right moment, I could lead him to the Imperial Garden and they would take action. Whether it succeeded or failed, it would be my last gamble with Huaying. But now I shook my head and said, Huaying saved my life, and that's enough. Yuan Yao chuckled. Do you really think you could take my life, Miss Song? Chunyan, everything you've achieved today, the revenge you've taken, was all thanks to me supporting you behind the scenes. You should be thanking me. Your Highness, don't call me Miss Song anymore. I have no father, no mother, no family. How could I still be called Miss? Then I won't call you Miss Song. How about just calling you Chunyan? I knew his intentions. Once the truth about the Song family came to light, Yuan Yao, if he publicly accepted me, the last surviving member of the Song family, into his palace, would enhance his own reputation greatly. I shook my head. Call me Song Chunyan. The case of Song Tan, General Song, was overturned and cleared of charges of treason. Yuan Yao acted as the regent and boldly exposed that his father was the mastermind behind both the Battle of Luanjiang and the treasonous conspiracy. The entire court was in an uproar. The emperor, after losing all bodily functions from the stroke and only hanging on to a breath of life, had lost the people's support. He was forced to abdicate in favor of Yuan Yao, who took the throne. The remaining surviving female family members from the military camps were released and brought back to the capital. I walked into the prison amid the cheers outside. Cheng-Chi lay there in blood-soaked clothes, appearing dead. I held the imperial order Yuan Yao had given me and instructed the jailer to open the cell door. The young general, the jade-faced war god, was now disheveled, his face smeared with blood. Gone was the former glory he had when he entered the capital just days ago. I used my foot to nudge him awake, and when he saw me, his hazy gaze gradually cleared. I held my head high, speaking in a calm tone, the same arrogant attitude he used to hate about me, and softly asked, "Do you know? The Battle of Luanjiang was deliberately lost by your father, Cheng Qingye, under the emperor's orders. He sacrificed the lives of 10,000 soldiers." You're lying." He gasped for breath, glaring at me. "Why don't you believe it? You too are exactly the same. Only with such a foolish general, who disregards the lives of soldiers, could a son like you, easily deceived and ungrateful, be born." He tried to raise his hand to strike me, but he didn't have the strength to lift it. I sneered. Yuan Yao had tortured him so severely that I couldn't even retaliate. "You told me once that the souls of the 10,000 soldiers from Luanjiang would never forgive me, but I see that you've lived quite well these years. It seems those souls are waiting for you down there, to tear you apart just as they did your father, who died early and will never be able to reincarnate. Now, there's no Song family to protect you anymore." He lifted his head, still not giving up. "The Emperor will save me. Once I get out, I forgot to tell you," I interrupted. "The man you speak of can no longer be called the Emperor. He must be addressed as the late Emperor. The current Emperor has been replaced. It's Yuan Yao, the one you failed to assassinate." The sounds of the cannons from the new emperor's coronation could be heard, shaking the prison with each blast. In the midst of those thunderous sounds, Cheng-Chi seemed to be struck with each cannon blast, his entire demeanor slowly deflating. "Do you want to beg me again to save you?" His head snapped up, clearly recalling the time when I had spared his life despite his earlier arrogance. Like that time, Cheng-Chi used every ounce of strength to crawl and kneel at my feet, repeatedly saying, Chunyan, I know I was a fool. I was blinded by stupidity and did something worse than a pig or a dog. It was all because I love you so much. I've always felt inferior in front of you, thinking I'm not good enough for you. That's why I lost my mind and hurt you. Chunyan, please save me. Save me. Once I get out, I will love you like I did before. I won't hold what happened in the army against you. Please give me a chance to make things right. Chunyan, please, I beg you, save me." He was still able to talk while kowtowing, and I could tell that Cheng-Chi had more energy than he appeared to. I squatted down, seeing the hope in his eyes. It was the hope of survival. A muffled sound rang out as he suddenly fell to the ground, clutching his stomach in disbelief. I hadn't drawn the dagger. I had taken it from his tent earlier, and now I returned it to him. As I walked out of the prison, the howling wind seemed to come from the northern frontier. I took the handkerchief Xiaolon handed me and wiped the blood from my hands. The jade clasp on my chest reminded me of the promise I made to Qiao Lian to travel the rivers and lakes with her and her brothers. The sun was perfect for a journey, and today was the day to set off. End of the novel.